Sports, Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on C-SPAN.
Now, coverage of Day 59 of military action in Yugoslavia from the state-controlled Serbian television in Belgrade. This was recorded at 1:30 p.m. Eastern and translated at C-SPAN in Washington. It's about a half hour.
You're watching primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. Respected viewers, the President of the Republic, Slobodan Milošević, received today the parliamentary delegation of Greece, with representatives of all parliamentary parties. The guests expressed the solidarity of the Greek people with the people of Yugoslavia and the support for its heroic resistance to the NATO aggression. President of the Republic, Milošević, received today the parliamentary delegation from Greece, headed by Lambros Kanellopoulos. There were parliamentary representatives of all parties: the Communist Party of Greece, PASOK, the New Democracy, the Coalition of the Left and Progress, Sinas Pismoza, and the Democratic Social Movement. In the friendly discussion, the guests expressed the great solidarity of the Greek people for the Yugoslavs and their strong support for the heroic resistance of Yugoslavs against the NATO aggression. The crimes of NATO that kill civilians and destroy civilian facilities are condemned by the Greeks from all parties, who demand from their government to immediately start appealing for an end of this aggression. The Greek parliamentarians stressed that the voice of opposition to this behavior of NATO is growing throughout Europe, and any attempt to ignore it is an assault on the fundamental democratic and civilizational values. President Milošević stressed that aside from the many crimes against our country, there is one not often mentioned but committed by NATO as well. The perfect accusation of NATO about the forced exodus of Kosovo Albanians, although it's very well known that the Albanians, as well as all other people, left Kosovo because of the bombing. The attempts to find a peaceful and political solution that Yugoslavia has been advocating should win over the dictate of force. The bombing should stop, and the problem should be resolved within the UN. UN must return to its basic role in the world, said President Milošević during this meeting. The meeting was also attended by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Živadin Jovanović, as well as the Greek ambassador to Yugoslavia, Panayotis Vlasopoulos. The President of the Republic, Milan Milutinović, received today Dr. Boris Iljenko, Director for the Scientific and Technological Exchanges of Serbia, as well as Borana Borić-Brešković, Director of the National Museum, on the occasion of the great exhibition of copies of frescoes from Kosovo churches to be opened on May 26th in Athens. President Milutinović is the general sponsor of this exhibition. It was organized by the International Institute for Educational, Cultural and Scientific Exchange and the Greek Association for International Cultural Relations, together with the National Museum from Belgrade. After Athens, the exhibit will travel to Corfu, Rhodos, Crete, Thessaloniki and Patras. President Milutinović stressed the importance of adding our cultural heritage, especially from Kosovo, in international programs and its presentation as an important aspect of the world cultural heritage. Kosovo is a center to the development of Serbian statehood, culture, and national identity. These values are today aspects of the multicultural and multi-ethnic reality of Kosovo, Serbia, and Yugoslavia as a whole. The President recognized the Institute for International Technical, Educational, and Cultural Cooperation, as well as to the National Museum, and thanked the Greek institutions that helped in the organization of this project, expressing conviction that in the future this exhibit will also shown in many other world centers. The government of Serbia at today's session, presided over by Mirko Marjanović, stressed that the bombing of the hospital Dragiša Mišović in Belgrade, which killed 4 patients, wounded 2 women in labor, as well as several babies, children and hospital workers, is one more monstrous crime that confirms the unscrupulousness and immorality of NATO. The unscrupulous attack on immobile patients and women in labor at a place that represents a protected zone according to all civilizational values, with a cynical explanation that this is a mistake or collateral damage, is one more evidence of the evil strategy of NATO, expressed in killing of innocent civilians and destruction of civilian property. The government of Serbia stresses the essential necessity that international community insist on immediate end of such crimes and this aggression. The end of the bombing will enable us to go to peace, the return of the refugees and the renewal of the political process for resolving the Kosovo crisis. The government also adopted the draft regulation on the final budget balance for 1998 and sent it to the President of Serbia so that he can pass it in accordance with his authorities. It was concluded that the budget for 1998 was realized completely as planned and in full compliance with the restrictive fiscal policy. The government also considered today the situation regarding prices in the market during war times. It was concluded that the prices remain stable while supplies are regular and that all companies abide by the regulations set for them. To maintain the overall stability of the market and the prices, the government adopted draft regulation on trade with goods, services and taxation and sent it to the President of Serbia to pass this regulation in accordance with his constitutional authorities. The government passed several additional measures aimed at improving the social conditions of the employees whose work has been endangered by these war actions. The criminal alliance continued to target exclusively civilian facilities throughout the country. The correctional facility in Istok alone, where at least 19 people died, was hit by 24 missiles. NATO Air Force attacked also the border zone of Dečani County, Đakovica area, as well as the area of Belačevac in Kosovo Polje, inhabited only by Albanians. NATO airplanes attacked the areas of Smederevo, Pirot, Kraljevo, also the bridge on the highway Belgrade-Niš at Jasenica River near Veliko Orašje. At least 20 people died and more than 10 were wounded in today's attack on the correctional facility Dubrava near Istok. Both prisoners and their guards were victims. NATO has been incessantly bombing this correctional facility since about 8:30 a.m. Around the walls of this facility, hit at least by 20 missiles, there are several craters. Many buildings have been damaged. The place of this beastly attack was visited by several foreign and domestic journalists who came to see for themselves how monstrous this attack was. Very close after the journalists left the site of the attack, sometime before 2 p.m., the NATO criminals appeared once again and hit the correctional facility with several missiles. The NATO aggressor once again attacked civilian facilities in Smederevo at 11 a.m. Several missiles hit the fuel facility of Jugopetrol. This is the 7th time that NATO has attacked this facility. One missile hit the industrial zone of Smederevo. At the same time, they hit the bridge on the highway near Velika Plana that has already been targeted. Last night around midnight, Sombor became one more target. This time they attacked civilian and residential areas in the east part of town. 2 houses were completely destroyed in Vuk Karadžić Street, 30 buildings were damaged. There are no military facilities nearby, which confirms once again that NATO murderers do not choose their targets. Although the defenders of our fatherland are faced with technologically far superior enemy, the anti-aircraft units of Pristina Corps inflict daily damages to the aggressor, including its manpower. So far, in our actions against NATO, we have hit 3 rockets, the unmanned aircraft Hunter type and 2 planes AT Thunderbolt. They have nothing to look for in our country. They haven't managed to reach their goals. They should withdraw as soon as possible, and we shall fight until the end. What would you tell our people? To persevere, not to give up. To persevere until the end. The end is near. The victory is ours. For his courage and professionalism in defending his country, commander of the 3rd Army, General Nebojša Pavković, promoted the Master Sergeant Saša Mitić to lieutenant. About a month ago, I downed an unmanned plane of the Hunter type. I didn't think much when I acted, but when it began falling, I felt really special, something inside me. And we continue to target such planes and hope that not only I hit them, but any single soldier from my platoon. About 20 days ago, I targeted a bombarder plane that attacked the unit I was protecting. It was successfully hit, as confirmed by the media. It crashed on the territory of Macedonia. And thus, day and night, these guardians of our sky are awaiting their moment. They're waiting for even one opportunity, for as shown thus far, those single shots have been right on target. Today, on the territory of Macedonia, one more missile of the criminal alliance fell. The worried citizens called the police that the missile fell close to the village of Brest in the area of Skopska Crna Gora. The Macedonian police established that the missile created a huge crater 4 meters in depth. Just as many times before, NATO alliance did not respond in Macedonia, but the Ministry of Internal Affairs confirmed that they will undertake detailed investigation. Istok was on the list of targets to be bombed by NATO, stated at the press conference in Brussels the military spokesperson of NATO, Walter Gerz. Spokesman of NATO said that the Supreme Commander of NATO, Wesley Clark, spent 2 hours trying to explain to 19 ambassador the technical mistake with the Belgrade hospital. He apologized, especially to the Western Alliance member, because, as he said, they also damaged during this attack several embassies. Clark also tried to tie some loose ends in the alliance, given the drastic division among its members regarding the strategy on Yugoslavia. The spokesperson, Jamie Shame, did not even mention that during that hospital attack, 4 patients died, several more were wounded, and that they destroyed one of the best hospitals in the Balkans. The spokespersons of NATO also were silent regarding the latest demand by the Foreign Minister Fischer from Germany, who asked for reevaluation of the target list. During last night's attack on the fuel facility of Jugopetrol in Belgrade, severe damage was sustained by the Swiss embassy. Almost all windows are broken. During that time, there was a reception at the residence on the occasion of the national holiday. The embassy of India was also damaged. The students of the Kragujevac High School who survived the massacre by the German fascists of October 21, 1941, addressed an open letter to the German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder and the Foreign Minister Josef Fischer, noting that for a 3rd time this century German soldiers kill innocent people of Yugoslavia, burn our houses, destroy our bridges, and everything that our country has struggled to build after the fascist destruction of World War II. The history unfortunately repeats itself, stressed the students of the Kragujevac High School who survived the massacre from 1941. The activities of the Secretariat for Minority Rights within the Interim Executive Council of Kosovo have from the beginning of the aggression been aimed at preserving the inter-ethnic relations among the many nationalities living in this area, even as the enemy tries to disrupt these relations. With its war and propaganda, the people of Kosovo have growing conviction that equality and tolerance are foundations of good inter-ethnic relations in Kosovo. In Kosovo, the aggressor believes that they could disrupt the inter-ethnic relations by their attacks, but on the terrain, we know that everybody who recognizes this state, regardless of ethnicity, all of these people continue to live together and work all of those who support the separatist organization, the so-called KLA, they are not with us. Therefore, we can say that in this aggression, all loyal citizens organize themselves to protect the state and normalize their life and work in the terrain. There is no discrimination. My secretariat, that is the Secretariat for Ethnic Rights in Kosovo, is a true confirmation that there are people who come every day to us, they tell us about certain problems, and we try to help them regardless of ethnicity. The president of the Kosovo Democratic Initiative, Faik Hashari, and his colleagues visited the village of Korisha, the wounded citizens and the family members of people who suffered during the NATO aggression attack on the column of refugees of the 14th of May. To families, about 100 families, there were humanitarian assistance given. The goal of the Kosovo Democratic Initiative is to help all of the people, regardless of ethnicity and religion, to return the confidence of people, because this is the future of all of the citizens throughout Kosovo and Yugoslavia. At the regular press conference in Belgrade, the spokesman of the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nebojša Vujović, stressed that the UN Security Council must be the place where the end of the aggression has to be decided upon right now. Yugoslavia expects that the UN Security Council reaffirm our policy and role in all of the phases of the political negotiations and its implementation throughout the territory of Yugoslavia. He also added that Yugoslavia and President Milosevic are key factors for a political solution of the Kosovo crisis and its implementation. The hospital hit 2 nights ago when several patients were killed and many more injured, as well as all other civilian sufferings in Yugoslavia, are an unprecedented crime, said at the press conference the spokesman of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Nebojša Vujović. The rain of bombs on the hospital Dragiša Mišović, where 4 deliveries were taking place, can be by no means qualified as collateral damage. It was a target hit with great precision. Still, Yugoslavia remains open to a peaceful political solution and ready to play a constructive role in finding that solution for Kosovo. The evidence is also the decision of the 9th of May on partial withdrawal of our forces from Kosovo, which opens the path of solution agreed upon during the visit of Viktor Černomerdin to Belgrade. Vujović also said that Yugoslavia is ready to accept the UN mission, but its mandate, modality and scope must be agreed upon in a direct dialogue between Yugoslavia and UN. At the same time, the political solution can be met only after the bombardment ends, and it has to be based on the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of Yugoslavia, with Kosovo as its integral part. The UN Security Council has to be the place to decide upon on the end of this aggression right now. The Federal Republic of Yugoslavia asks that the UN Security Council reaffirm our position throughout all phases of the negotiations and its implementation finally throughout the territory. He also added that Yugoslavia and President Milosevic are key factors for a political solution for Kosovo crisis and its implementation. Despite the gangster attacks of the aggressor on Yugoslavia, the reasonable world continues to seek political solution for the Balkans. Balkans is indeed a negotiating headquarters today once again. The Russian State Duma at today's closed session sent to President Clinton, the US Congress and the governments of Europe an appeal for an immediate end of the aggression on Yugoslavia and begin the process of political regulation. They said that any imposition of decision on international presence is inadmissible, that any such question has to be resolved by means of consensus of the permanent members of the UN Security Council after consultations with Yugoslavia. The main objective of Russia in this crisis is to be an ally to Yugoslavia, not just a mediator, stated the president of Duma, Gennady Seleznyov, at this closed session, at which also Igor Ivanov, Marshal Sergeyev and Viktor Chernomydin briefed the members on their peace initiatives and discussions on international level. Speaking of the 3-party meeting between Chernomyrdin, Ahtisaari and Talbot that lasted throughout last night and will continue next week, the special envoy for the Balkans stressed that the solution is being sought and the negotiations will continue. There are differences in the position of Russia and the US regarding the Kosovo crisis, especially with regard to the international force and the withdrawal of the Yugoslav army, stated Igor Ivanov after the meeting with the Deputy Secretary of State Strop Talbot. But Talbot insists that the negotiations continue. Russia demands an immediate end of the bombardment of Yugoslavia and an inclusion of the UN in the political resolution of the conflict. That would happen a lot faster if NATO stopped its military intervention. The Greek Foreign Minister Papandreou stressed that all decisions have to be based on the resolution of the UN Security Council. Carl Bildt believes that the international community is no longer capable of preventing a humanitarian disaster and that all initiatives for political solutions have to be taken upon immediately. President Yeltsin confirmed today, prior to leaving for a 2-week vacation, that the Foreign Minister Ivanov and the Minister of Defense Marshal Sergeyev will keep their present functions in the new Russian government. President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, asked his authorized agencies to analyze the use of space devices during the armed attacks on Yugoslavia. On the basis of that analysis, Russia will come up with a program for development and use of its own devices and armament of that kind. The meeting of the political directors of the G8 countries continues in Bonn, aimed at drafting the resolution for a political solution for Kosovo. The resolution should be based on the ministerial declaration adopted recently in Bonn. The Swiss government expressed concerns because of the damage of the ambassador's residence in Belgrade. This residence was damaged during the attack on the fuel attack and at the moment when there was a reception celebrating National Day. The Swiss Foreign Minister Joseph Deissner said he was going to intervene at the headquarters of the alliance. The German Foreign Minister Fischer remembered to say that given the growing damage to civilian facilities in Belgrade, the list of NATO targets must be reconsidered. The German representative in Brussels is to raise that question during the meetings at NATO. Fischer believes that the target list ought to be reevaluated to avoid civilian casualties. That doesn't mean that he advocates a halt in the bombing campaign, as he stated. The end of the bombing campaign can happen only after a political solution is reached on the basis of the G8 ministerial decision. Brussels media warned that the growing mistakes by NATO fail to produce rational explanation. Libre Belgique talks about the heavy consequences of the hospital bombing, a 9th mistake acknowledged by NATO during this aggression. Le Soir writes on the front page that the alliance continues to err while diplomats are seeking a political way out. The Italian media report extensively on the hospital attack in Belgrade. The photograph of the mother with a just-born daughter wounded in the attack appeared in all papers. The Milano paper Corriere della Sera underlines the photograph with the caption "Between life and death." The Daily Manifesto stresses that the NATO strategy clearly does not function. It seems that NATO generals nor Western governments understand that the more they bomb, the Serbian people become more determined not to surrender to this greatest army in human history. Leading Bulgarian papers publish on their front pages the information about the destruction of the hospital in Belgrade. Duma notes that the diplomatic efforts of Chernomyrdin for a peaceful solution do not seem to mean anything to NATO, that despite everything continues to attack civilian targets such as hospital. The general impression is whenever there are peace initiatives, NATO hurries up to kill them with even stronger bombardment. These murderers of NATO have to appear on a Nuremberg trial, just as that happened for the Nazi leaders. NATO is responsible for severe war crimes and has no right to talk about human rights, stresses the Chinese news agency Xinhua. This war is a mirror that reflects the real agenda of NATO in terms of its politics of force and hegemony. The bombing of Yugoslavia is not only the greatest war action of NATO over the past 5 decades of its existence, but the most barbaric war action in Europe after World War II. Washington Post writes that according to the general public, the Kosovo strategy is an absolute nonsense. The solution certainly cannot be in the bombardment, stresses Washington Post, request and suggest to the American administration to avoid the fiasco and accept the negotiations for political solution of the Kosovo crisis. The British Prime Minister Blair and his Labour Party rejected the request on the creation of a commission that would investigate the causes of the aggression on Yugoslavia. That request was made by the opposition party of the Conservatives. The Foreign Minister of the shadow government, Michael Howard, says that the Conservatives are not going to give up on this request. As analysts note, Blair's arrogant rejection shows that he has made many mistakes and that he is afraid of the truth. The British daily papers report that NATO seriously considers an end of the bombardment of Yugoslavia within the framework of the stronger diplomatic initiatives. Daily Telegraph believes that this would be a serious move away from the earlier demands of NATO. Other papers also talk about the German media that portray the British Prime Minister as a lonely hawk. Guardian talks about a conflict between Clinton and Blair. As they say on their front page, in an unusually unpleasant 90-minute telephone conversation, Clinton expressed anger that Blair doesn't seem to control the people around him who stress the differences between Washington and London regarding the war in Yugoslavia. The influential Daily Telegraph stresses that most of the governments throughout the world and millions of people share an opinion that it is absolutely unacceptable to bomb the city centers. A cowardly war has become a currency, stresses the Daily Telegraph. In the US, Robin Cook met Madeleine Albright. These two hawks appeared in front of the cameras. Asked about civilian casualties, such as during the attack on the hospital in Belgrade, Albright clearly avoided an answer. Cook added that no war can be expected without mistakes, using the word war, which the alliance has otherwise insistently avoided in order to conceal that their brutal assault on a sovereign country has been war. One viewer of the program asked when the bombing would be over and how much would the US taxpayers have to pay for everything that NATO has done. He didn't get an answer, but no further questions were allowed. Albright didn't miss the opportunity to show once again the personal dimension of this aggression for her. The Vice President of China's government, Hu Jintao, said that NATO has to take full responsibility for the Chinese embassy attack in Belgrade and give full explanation. Otherwise, China retains the right to undertake additional measures. They cite also several diplomats and experts who stress that one cannot accept the American and NATO explanation that this was a mistake. This must have been a planned, premeditated attack as a pressure on China, which supports Yugoslavia. China also confirmed that they forbade American combat boats to reach Hong Kong as a response. The Australian paper Sydney Morning Herald says that everyone who has read the so-called Rambouillet document, the great deception that Tony Blair called a crusade for civilization, understood that the excuses for NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia were fabricated. In Rambouillet, the Serbs were told, surrender and we'll occupy you, or don't surrender and we'll destroy you. The goal of NATO was not only to occupy Kosovo, but Yugoslavia as a whole. Only recently has the French paper Le Monde Diplomatique published the Rambouillet proposal. These unacceptable conditions for the Serbs have not been published in Britain yet. No similar ultimatum has ever been placed before a sovereign state in Europe, with the exception of Hitler's ultimatum to Czechoslovakia. Hitler's deception that opened the road to German expansion is nothing bigger than the deception of NATO, which in the name of globalization wants to conquer the world. The Australian paper notes that the NATO bombing was planned already by 12th of August last year. Rambouillet, in which NATO demanded to be the only military and civilian authority, was just a pretext. Throughout the world, there are more protests against the aggression on Yugoslavia, as well as gathering of humanitarian assistance. This weekend, there will be protests in many cities throughout the world. Tomorrow, there will be protests in Stuttgart, Strasbourg, and Copenhagen. Every day, at the main central square in Stockholm, at a previously agreed upon time, many citizens of Stockholm gather. The message is very clear and sent both to the Swedish and the world public. Stop the bombing. This is not how you make peace. During the past 50-some days, you could see up to 4,000 people who were protesting together under the Yugoslav flag and who were crying out slogans both in Swedish and Serbian language. We don't give Kosovo and Serbia. Long live Yugoslavia. NATO, go back to your homes. At the beginning, they usually have a minute of silence. At the end, they sing the Yugoslav anthem, always with the hope that there will be no more need for other meetings. This is how our citizens, but also Greeks, Russians, Chinese, Latin Americans, and Kurds living in Sweden express their dissatisfaction and bitterness because of this deadly assault on civilization. These demonstrations have become a record in Sweden because of their length. Many professors, actors, opera singers appear in front of these protest gatherings. Intellectuals, students, as well as Swedish individuals who are embarrassed because of the Swedish government position. One of the first people to express their support for the protests was Anita de la Fontaine from the ruling Socialist Democratic Party. She is also one of the members of a committee for and founder of the committee for an immediate end of the bombing campaign. There are many other members in the Socialist Democratic Party who support this initiative, as well as members of other parties. This committee prepares for the 24th of May, the first joint demonstrations in Stockholm. In Germany, in Stuttgart, they established a special fund for assistance to Yugoslavia. This is an image of the meeting with the donors held at the General Consulate of Yugoslavia in Stuttgart. The contributions have been paid in by over 230 clubs and individuals from the Baden-Württemberg area, ranging from 100 marks to 10,000 marks. The largest amount of 10,000 German marks was paid in by Radivoj Kovačev, a restaurateur from Gepingen, and Milan Todorov from Mannheim. Among the clubs and associations, the greatest financial contribution was made by the organizers of the protest in Stuttgart, the Forum for Serbian Interests, then the Serbian Cultural Center from Balingen, a court from Stuttgart, Sveti Sava, the Club of Yugoslavs from Stuttgart, Fatherland from Karlsruhe, and many other associations. The appreciation certificates for the donors, who have already proven to be patriots many times, were given by the Consul General Milan Perovic. Milan Todorov from Mannheim spoke to those present, asking his compatriots to participate even more. This is just the beginning of my help. I'm going to thank you when our people are free, when they will be no longer hungry or exposed to aggression. I'm going to call you all and I'm going to thank you all. People from Belgrade continue to defend their bridges with their bodies. Just as any other day, the citizens who live on the left and the right side of Danube met at Pančevo Bridge to protect it from the unscrupulous aggressor. This time their message is very clear. We don't give Kosovo. We don't give bridges. We don't give Kosovo. The citizens of Belgrade continue to defend their bridges. At Gazela Bridge, which is one of the most important traffic links, this evening there are many people of Belgrade showing that they're defending not only their bridges but their country. At this bridge there are heroes of our people, people with great heart. And I think that history should remember these people and their struggle for their great heart. The target is not what we have chosen. Our choice is our great heart, and this is what our army shows daily, and our police, as well as these people whom you see here at the bridge. I came to this bridge because I love my country, because I'm a patriot, and because I want, at least in this way, to contribute to the defense of my country and give support to all of those guys in Kosovo and the other parts of Serbia and Montenegro who are shedding their blood to protect us from the aggressor.